I want to welcome you to the City of North Charleston. This is the presentation of the Urban Land Institute's findings for their advisory service panel. There's a lot of people who helped put this together. It took a lot of work from a lot of stakeholders around the region, both from the city, the county, the Coastal Conservation League, community members, Metanoia, LAMC. I mean, we go on and on about who helped. I'm not going to name names because I'll forget you. But I was going to give everyone an opportunity, the sponsors, who are the Coastal Conservation League, the County Council, or Charleston County, and the City of North Charleston, to give a chance to say a few words, and then we'll get right into the presentation. So without further ado, I'll bring up Laura Cantrell to talk about their experience here, if that's okay.
Thank you. Good morning. Good morning, everyone. How's that echo? Because I will step away from the mic and just use my loud mom voice, because I have a loud mom voice. Can you all hear me? Great. Well, listen, I'm really glad to be here. I am Laura Cantrell. I'm the Executive Director of the Coastal Conservation League. We are a conservation advocacy nonprofit organization, and our mission and focus is on protecting the health of natural resources in the South Carolina coastal region, along with the health of our communities and the quality of life for all of our citizens. And I want to start by thanking all of you who live and work in this community for joining us today, especially on a rainy Friday morning. We appreciate you being here. And the Coastal Conservation League is humbled to partner with you, with our local community leaders on this special opportunity. Like you, I'm very excited to learn more from the Urban Land Institute and its stellar team that's spent time with you this week and has worked diligently to combine their expertise with your enthusiasm and keen insight. Thank you for taking time out of your busy schedules and time with your family this week to connect with these experts and share your thoughts on the future of this community. One thing I know for certain, North Charleston is your community. You and your neighbors and generations of North Charlestonians that have come before us have contributed to this community's unique and vibrant sense of place. The south end of North Charleston, the area that has been the study area and focus of this week's work, is worth celebrating and protecting. And it's also a place worth investing in. This community, and in fact our entire coastal region, is growing at an unprecedented rate. We all know that. You have an important voice in ongoing discussions around equality, mobility, affordable housing, economic opportunity, food access, land conservation, community design, and much more. You have an opportunity to help transform this study area into a connected, vibrant community center that houses a low-country rapid transit line. We believe that bus rapid transit system can provide a safe and effective mode of transportation and serve surrounding neighborhoods. And we also believe that policies that enable denser, mixed-use development along the rivers would enhance the success of a bus rapid transit system. This week's program with the Urban Land Institute is a good first step, but it's just that, a first step. The Coastal Conservation League remains committed to supporting an extended, community-driven planning effort that's collaborative and involves local residents, community leaders, the City of North Charleston, and Charleston County, and one that produces results. None of us wants to see another study or another report that's going to sit on a shelf. We want action. We can work together to ensure the needs and desires of this community are met and realized. Let's implement your vision. And I want to say a special thank you to the panelists for all of your hard work this week, for traveling from your homes and taking time away from your families to lend your expertise. And thank you to North Charleston and Charleston County Council members and staff for your willingness to partner with us to provide this public engagement opportunity. It's been our pleasure, and we look forward to more. Thank you.
Thank you, Laura. Next, I was going to introduce Herb Sass from the county government. He's vice chair of county council, and he's going to have a few words, and we appreciate your collaboration and support of the sponsorship.
Yes, sir. Thank you. Good morning, everyone. Glad to see y'all. Appreciate everybody who's come to spend a week here with us and all the great work you've done. You've gotten to see a lot of our property, a lot of our city, a lot of our citizens, and you've gotten to see a wide range of our weather. So appreciate y'all all being here. Charleston County, we're real excited to be part of this. We work in a lot really close with North Charleston and the mayor, and you know, this is a very important property and a very important area that we feel very, very strongly that we need to all work together to make this happen. I'm excited about this week. I've enjoyed meeting everybody. I've enjoyed meeting the people that interviewed me and that talked to us. I'm impressed by the number of people who've been here, and I have to say the city has had lots of presence. The county's had lots of presence. And so I just thank everybody for what you're doing. I'm looking forward to hearing the report. Thank you all very much.
So, thank you, Mr. Sass. Now I'm going to introduce Mayor Summey, who I first want to thank because not only is my boss, but I think he's a friend, and a lot of this wouldn't have happened without his support. Also, Miss Debbie Summey, who grew up in Chicora, Cherokee, and has a real deep passion for the neighborhood and for the city as a whole, and without their two support and leadership, we wouldn't be here today. So thank you so much, Mayor. Appreciate it.
Thank you. Let me just say that it has been wonderful to have somebody come in and look from a mile-high approach. Sometimes those of us that are engaged in it on a daily basis get sort of locked into concepts and thoughts that we have, and we can't see the larger picture. So sometimes we need someone to come in and just give us concept, give us ideas, at least room for us to try to advance forward. Because at the end of the day, we're working to enhance the quality of life of people who live in a region of our community. And the best way that we can do that is the way that we need to work together to accomplish that. Let me just say thank you for working with us through the Coastal Conservation League. I think this is probably the first project that we've had together. Usually sometimes people think we're enemies, but we're not. We all care about what goes on and what makes the community better. And I also want to thank Charleston County for stepping in with us and slowing down their progress of what they were doing on that property. To work with the community to look at the overall picture as well. And of course, our city council for supporting us and working with us, always trying to find ways that makes the quality of life better for all of the citizens of the city of North Charleston. So I'm going to ask all the members of county government, whether you're staff or whether you're elected, and all the members of the city of North Charleston council and staff that's been working on this, please stand so that we can acknowledge your time and effort put into this project. I think I have a quorum here. That's why we have the media on the front row, because we can't take any vote. But I also, these folks that are here, you know, it's great to have folks that have been engaged in development across the country, have used their ideas and concepts and find out how things blend together and work together for the common good. So we're going to be listening to their thoughts and ideas. We will be probably implementing a number of them. In development, we always know as time changes, so does what we can do sometimes, because it's who comes to the table and who owns the property and what have you. But at least we've got a map now, and we need a road map to follow to get to the end of the road where we're trying to go. And this is going to give us that. And so it's been a pleasure meeting all of you, and thank you for giving us of your time and your effort to try to make our world here in North Charleston a little better. God bless you.
Thank you, Mayor Summey. With that, I'm going to introduce Andrew Irvine, who's with the Urban Land Institute. He is the chair of this panel. I was going to let you come up and start the presentation. Thanks again, everyone, for being here.
Thank you. And so it begins. Thank you, Mayor Summey, Vice Chair Suss, Executive Director Cantrell, elected officials, county and city staff, and most importantly, the members of your community. We've really enjoyed and been grateful for the hospitality you've provided us for this week. It is indeed, Southern hospitality is indeed warm, and even within a week, we feel like we're a part of your family. You've shared so much with us, so we appreciate that. I also want to reiterate, thank you so much for the three sponsor groups that have come together and really made this happen this week. We understand that it's the first time these three groups have collaborated together this closely. And it just reflects the importance of the fact that it takes a village, right? No one independent entity can deliver the exceptional outcomes that are required with these sorts of collaborations. And I'd be remiss if I didn't thank the support team, that wonderful team of Adam McConnell, Ryan Johnson, Jason Crowley, and Joel Evans from the county, who have put in an enormous amount of work to allow us to float into town. We parachuted in on Sunday. We had briefing books. We had information at our fingertips. We've probably bugged them senseless through the course of the week with backup questions and information, and they've been on hand at each time. And so it showed the level of commitment and the level of care that your community has to this sort of initiative. But mostly, or not mostly, but in addition to, thank you for the 90 people that we met with just on Tuesday alone, who have shared with us your hopes, wishes, fears, concerns, and invited us to understand your community and the values that your community represent. And without that, we would not have been able to have done the work and come to the conclusions and recommendations that we have. So who are we? The Urban Land Institute is a non-profit research and education organisation with approximately 40,000 members worldwide, whose stated mission is to provide leadership in the responsible use of land and in creating and sustaining thriving communities worldwide. And really, with the world changing as quickly as it is through technology or through resilience and other issues, there are so many complex issues that need to be addressed. And so this entity is committed to really investing in understanding how to manage best those issues. But one of the most fun pieces, and I don't know why I do this, of one of the most interesting initiatives of the Urban Land Institute is this panel process, right? Where we come into your community for a week and we try to get to understand what are your issues and how do we move the dial on where you are. And you've got a lot of adventure and a lot of opportunity coming to your community. And really now it's a matter of how do you take that and package it in a way that really does, everyone sort of has a part of. And so today our focus is going to be on just that. One of the strengths of this process is that we are all volunteers. We come into town with all care but no responsibility. And I know that sounds probably a little obtuse, but we don't carry any particular agenda. And we can see things through the filter of our professional eyes. And that's the strength that we're able to bring. We don't have the politics. We don't have the nuance of the day-to-day issues that you have to deal with. So it gives us a lot of freedom. But I've been working with this just amazing group of people who have helped really put their efforts, their shoulders into this initiative. Development strategist Aletha Dunstan, landscape architect Paul Peters, academic and planner Emil Mazia, property developer Lance Robbins, mobility specialist Veronica Davis, housing expert Rosie Hepner, community development expert Catherine Buell, and financing and implementation specialist Thomas Jansen and Gail Starr. But we couldn't also have done this without the amazing resources of the Urban Land Institute who have supported us along the way. Kelly Slepin, Ashley Robertson, and Michaela Kadanoff. So We came to town, we were presented with 8 questions, and we hope that during the course of the week that we've been able to address and each of these questions address the nature of change affecting your community. How do you shape change? How do you deal with some of the issues that come with that? And, you know, cities are messy business. I don't need to tell you that. There are all sorts of complex issues that all come together along the way. And often they're bound by a great deal of emotion, right? And so we're able to look at these things without, you know, the filter of that emotion. But the value of an impartial team really does bring objectification to this process. We've found North Charleston through this process to be a community of great diversity and rich history, a place that all these qualities have been reinforced through the many discussions and interviews conducted throughout the panel week. The rich and distinctive qualities of your neighbourhood is an important defining aspect of North Charleston. However, it's not highly promoted. I mean, you have rich and strong neighbourhoods, and I think you've got a strong base to celebrate and to move forward with. So providing clear recommendations to help guide the change has been the focus of our work this week. And so now Aletha and Paul will start off by sharing our understanding of what we've learned initially about your community.
Hi, good morning. Okay. So I'm excited to share how we started our analysis this week. I know a lot of you are excited to talk about the intersection of the day, but we actually started our review kind of at a much higher level. So first, how did we get here? This area, traditionally defined by 2 rivers, was historically a collection of farms and wetlands, originally envisioned as a beautiful riverfront park to serve greater Charleston area. So the military quickly identified that potential, changed the plans as the location for their naval base. So housing and retail developed to support the naval base. The neighborhoods thrived and established their own identities. I don't need to tell you about your history. You know your history better than I do. But I can tell you I know something about BRAC closures, as currently responsible for the redevelopment of a military installation. And what it can do to your mobility and access issues, your lack of community services, reduced home ownership, and just general systematic disinvestment in the area. You compound that with the fact that North Charleston didn't have much time, just about 20 years of being incorporated as a community before these conversations started. So you really do have the result of a community of neighborhoods with their own identity. So one of the questions that we started asking, kind of what we would think of from a planning perspective, is where's downtown North Charleston? So we asked several stakeholders. We heard a lot of different answers. I think myself, I heard maybe 5 or 6 different locations identified. And that can be fine, but we just have to be cognizant of the fact that we have multiple locations serving this purpose. So community services, government services, gathering spaces, and shopping are dispersed across the city. What we have to do is just make sure we're very intentional about how we identify these areas and the populations that are served so that we can be grouping like opportunities together. But historically, we did identify 2 symbolic centers that are the east-west oriented Reynolds and Montague Avenues. So both are categorized by their history, historic building stock, density, walkable shopping and dining areas, streetscape, and different places to gather. Obviously, what differentiates the 2 is the amount of time and investment that's been put into them over the last few decades. So I think with that, I'm going to turn this over to Paul to talk a little bit more about what we found during our analysis.
In the process of zooming out, one of the initial questions that we began to think about is what is the kind of the character and nature of the study area development at Rivers Avenue and McMillan. And in order to kind of understand that, what it should be, we had to zoom up, 1,000 miles in the sky to look down at the site. And so through that process, we had actually identified 3 potential centers for the community within this larger neck neighborhood. We also, as Aletha mentioned, there's also these existing kind of community gathering places which happen on Montague and Reynolds Avenue. So these east-west streets, Montague, Reynolds, potentially McMillan, and then also potentially Stromboli with the BRT station can serve as these community gathering places. We also identified these 4 larger districts, thinking about how we can create walkable communities, and also opportunities for future development beyond our proposed site, and thinking about a way as how can future development strengthen existing communities, and how can our site at Rivers and McMillan serve as a precedent for future development. So thinking about how can you create a walkable neighborhood with community gathering spaces? You know, how can you really bring these communities together and increase the quality of life for existing neighborhoods? And so we came up with 4 broad districts. Park Circle at the top district. As you come down, Noisette Creek, which is bounded by Noisette Creek to the north and Reynolds Avenue to the south. And the third one being the kind of Chickara district, which has a central community park. And then further south, thinking about the Union Heights district, which has the Shipyard Creek and potentially a redevelopment of Stromboli Avenue. And so thinking about these kind of general areas, how can each one have a community gathering place, which can also be used for community outreach and engagement for future development and just kind of the life of communities, as well as how can we think about mobility within this larger area using Sproul Avenue and Rivers Avenue as these kind of loop roads with the east-west retail streets providing interstitial access. And then also thinking about how can we preserve and expand existing open space and connect these existing neighborhoods to this kind of larger landscape of the Low Country. And so first, looking at these potential centers where we are today at City Hall, we think this could be more of a civic center. And so moving in the Deoda services into the old Verizon building. And then also we know that there's a potential real estate or housing development going into the Regal Theater. So this is an opportunity to actually create this kind of civic center at City Hall and potentially having a public plaza outside of City Hall and creating this kind of regional center that's more about the city and the county. And then we begin to kind of move into our site at at Rivers and McMillan. This is more of a community services hub rather than a downtown. So this is really about the adjacent community, thinking about the library as well as other health services and the BRT and a potential for a food market, which we'll talk about later. And then finally, a third one that focuses more on the neighborhood scale and the existing neighborhoods. One of the things that we heard through community discussions was we need amenities for kids to come out that are safe, as well as amenities for just a kind of the community gather. One of the best ways to do that is just look at what do you have right now. And so there's 2 existing schools as well as a fire station that sit within this kind of open landscape that is currently chain link fenced off. And we can connect that simply by these 3 things, by creating a community park which serves the adjacent neighborhoods. So an example of what's the possibility of creating this civic plaza space, Sundance Square in Fort Worth, is an example of how they retrofitted an existing parking lot in a very simple, flexible plaza, and it's an opportunity for the community to come together at a kind of civic scale. And then we begin to talk about the retail streets as gathering spaces. And so the thing that we notice is it's an opportunity. We know that the BRT was going to be moving along Rivers, so faster kind of movement of traffic is going north-south. These kind of walkable neighborhood streets are actually in the east-west direction. We can use these for places for people to come together. And so we've seen the success of Montague Avenue. We think there could be a similar type of treatment along Reynolds Avenue with the investment coming in to promote small businesses that are already there and promote small businesses for existing community members. And then McMillan Avenue is more larger scale retail that would serve a kind of greater city or county level. And then finally, Stromboli Avenue at the bottom is this opportunity to create a kind of lower density, live-work, 2-3-story development that ties into the BRT line. And so each of these is thinking about where's the BRT, where are the existing neighborhoods, and how can we create these kind of walkable neighborhoods so people that can walk to amenities, walk to shops, groceries and things like that. And then secondly, how can we expand on these existing neighborhoods by tying into the larger open space? And through this, we want to preserve and expand the existing open space to improve the quality of life of people that live there. It's actually fairly simple. Noisette Creek Greenway already exists, and there's plans to already expand that, a boardwalk through that space. But how can we connect Noisette Creek and the Riverfront Park along McMillan using the powerhouse to the proposed development site at Rivers and McMillan? Also, I talked about the community park, expanding it there, but also at the very bottom with Shipyard Creek, looking at a potential development that could expand over into the Shipyard Creek area and expanding that up into the proposed transit hub center, which is on Hobson Avenue. And lastly, this development at Rivers and McMillan isn't the only development site within the area. And how can this, what we propose, act as a precedent for the larger community? And what we want to do when you look at development is, the Coastal Conservation League, their agenda is to protect existing open space, and the way to do that is to propose development within brownfield sites. So the orange on this map here identifies existing brownfield sites that are adjacent to existing neighborhoods, and so that new development would strengthen existing neighborhoods as well as protect open space. And so that you have this larger framework of a community that where people live, they're tied into retail, they're tied into retail amenities that they can walk to their local park, they can go out into the open space, as well as new communities that come in, kind of build upon this existing framework of the neighborhoods. Thank you.
Is this under warranty? Okay, so how do we start? One way is just with quick wins. We've only been here a week, but we have had the opportunity to see a lot of major community development projects, so we know you have the capacity to pull off great projects. But one thing we want to do is focus on projects that are engaging the community. Similar to the Reynolds Avenue Build a Better Block program that was recently undertaken, not every project's a multi-million-dollar investment. So this is an example of an underutilized parking lot space going through a similar project where the community had input in the design. So you can kind of see what that could do to a neighborhood. They didn't remove the fence, but just a bit of color and multi-use activity can do kind of wonders to change the identity of a neighborhood. So again, low cost, high impact. So other opportunities to involve the community in the design process are to make sure you're installing physical representations that highlight the unique character and identity of the individual neighborhoods in this area. Some of that can be done through branded wayfinding signage in and around the area, art displays that highlight history, working historic timelines and information about the neighborhood into physical projects that are permanently there and highlighted. And then you'll have several opportunities with BRT stops, not only to design those to feel like something special that kind of tells you the identity of the neighborhood, but be creative about what those stops are called. It doesn't always have to be an intersection, street name. So we've kind of added some best practices for engagement here. Again, we know that there are several opportunities and organizations doing this now, but I just want to highlight some ways to do that. One is to use hands-on engaging techniques. Meet the people where they are. Again, we know there are efforts to do this, but we heard overwhelmingly in our one-on-one interviews that a majority of the population does not feel reached or involved here, and that's something you face in every community, to be honest. I mean, if you're worried about your light bill being paid, you're not necessarily going to get 2 hours of your time in the evening to show up to play with blocks, especially if you don't have trust with the community. So trust is a commodity. It's hard won, but once you have it, it can do wonders. So we did add a few ways here of ways to kind of engage different populations, including translators, making sure you're holding opportunities in not only transit available areas, but ADA accessible areas, and being more creative about where we're putting our flyers and where we're telling our story. But most importantly, we have to make sure community engagement is engaging. We want them to have fun so they'll come back next time and follow along in the process. Some quick basic principles for equitable design. Excuse me. So one, we're going to ensure that development doesn't negatively impact existing neighborhoods. My colleagues are going to give some ideas of policies and procedures to make sure that change can be scary, but we want to make sure that we're preserving what's special without kind of scaring everyone away from getting involved. Retain, obtain, and utilize land. You're unique here that you do have a lot of government-controlled opportunities. That is something that some communities, spend the majority of their time and money doing is acquiring the land to do these projects. And again, reinforce that identity through the physical landscape and the arts, making sure we're engaging neighbors at every level of the design process so That doesn't just start when you need to kind of tick the box of community engagement. Want to engage the community, kind of identifying the priority projects, defining their character during the decision making, but then also finding opportunities to celebrate those big wins together as a community can really do wonders to build that trust equity. So now I'm going to turn it over to Emil that's going to answer the question you guys are all really here for.
I first read that you were going to spend $6 million to tear this thing down, and I said, that's got to be a bad idea. I had a mother who didn't throw anything away, and nothing was wasted in our house. But we did some analysis, and we conclude that you need to demolish the building and move on. We looked at a couple of different things. We could get into it in the Q&A if anyone wants more specifics, but the decision wasn't close. There's not an economically viable project that we could come up with that would justify the amount of investment required to come out with essentially a B office building. So if you demolish it and prepare the site for development, what about the county services that were envisioned to occupy the property in the range of 100 to 130,000 square feet? Well, we think those intended uses could be put really in two locations, with more of the medical and administrative services going to the building currently occupied by Verizon next door here, and have the Health and Human Services remain close to the Chicory neighborhood, Cherokee neighborhood, sorry. So with respect to what we're calling the retail depot site, planning area 3 on the left, and the County Naval Hospital site on the right, we think that for the first site, we should take advantage of the location of the new county library and cluster the county health and human services area nearby. As soon as feasible, bring in a grocery store and additional mixed-use development. And you see by the emojis, we know that there is a gas station at Rivers and McMillan planned, and that emoji is sad with a little tear in his eye. On the County Naval Hospital site, we see the transit center, a fresh food market, structured parking, mixed-use commercial development, mixed-income residential development, creating a strong public realm on that site by the use of open space and park space, incorporating arts and recreation, and achieving connectivity to the Chicora Cherokee neighborhood, which is the only site where we can accomplish that. To do this, parking becomes a major challenge. This is a challenge everywhere that has a suburban or auto-oriented development pattern. So basic principles, parking has to be structured. That's very expensive, but has to be done. But it also needs to be minimized, and the way it's minimized is to think in terms of parking maximums instead of parking minimums, and to have shared parking between commercial and complementary residential uses. So the long-term potential is in clustered development near open space and structured parking, where density is increased over time. And in the region I come from, when we talk about density, we call it the D word, because it's not very popular. But for this project to maximize its economic potential, as well as being equitable, density is your friend. And so this final slide just summarizes the ideas that I've presented with respect to the use of these two sites. Thank you.
Good morning. So one of the concepts that we heard loud and clear from a number of the folks that we interviewed is the need to make sure that the development is equitable and not only services and accomplishes economic development goals, but also services the community at large. And so we started our analysis of how to make sure that the buildings are pretty, the streetscapes are there, the uses are appropriate, but also that there are other benefits to this development by looking at what the demographics are, both in the region, the city, and the study area. And in the Charleston region, one of the things that we observed is that Charleston is doing pretty well. Charleston is growing. Area median income is $74,500, is actually pretty high. Folks are making good incomes and able to afford more. When you dive down into North Charleston, the area median income gets a little bit lower, about half of what the overall region is, just under $40,000. And the demographics, we started looking at the demographics there. You'll see that it's split between white families and African Americans in North Charleston generally. But when you focus on the study area in particular, you see a change in demographics. The area median income is just about $21,000 a year. You'll see that you have a largely African American population. You also see that while the rents are lower in the study area, that over 64% of the population spends more than 30% of their income on rent, which means there's a lot of rent instability in the study area and that affordable housing issues need to be addressed on their face. And there also needs to be a sensitivity to the racial dynamic with having a large African American population in the study area as the city and the county move through the redevelopment process. So we came up with a couple of recommendations that we just wanted to highlight as we start to look at how we approach this development in an equitable manner. First is the use of public land and the opportunities presented by using public land to address affordability and equity issues. There are a number of different instances. Oak Terrace Preserve is a beautiful, wonderful community that we understand that the city was able to acquire, but now the townhomes there are going for over $400,000 a year, which is pretty expensive when you look at what the incomes are of the area. Horizon Village, which was owned by the Housing Authority, provides over 430 affordable units and is a great example of how you can use public resources to make sure you're able to accommodate affordable housing. So as both the city and the county look at the use of the public land, it's important to make sure that the priorities around affordable housing are addressed, not only on this site, but also smaller sites that are owned within the surrounding communities. We talked to a number of different community land trusts who are looking to acquire some of the smaller city and county-owned parcels within the communities to preserve those as affordable housing. Quite frankly, that's a lot easier than taking on a large chunk of land and something that should be explored. Use of public funding. And so we looked at both the city and the county budgets, and coming from a place like Washington, D.C., which invests over $100 million in affordable housing every year and still can't keep pace, we see that there's opportunity both within the city and the county budgets to increase investments in affordable housing, not just relying on CDBG funds and home funds or the Housing Authority, but looking at potentially creating an affordable housing trust fund so that there is a pot of money available for whether it's nonprofits, whether it's government entities, whether it's through the public-private partnerships, to make sure that those initiatives are able to move forward and that affordable housing units are created both on the site and the surrounding communities. And finally, public staffing. In order to accomplish all of the ambitious goals, and we'll go through a number of them in this presentation, there has to be dedicated staff that are able to oversee these initiatives, build out the partnerships, make sure that the community is involved. That is literally a full-time job within itself and will likely require a number of different staffers. And so looking at Charleston as an example, which is just down the road, that has a housing and community development arm, potentially looking to establish that within the city of North Charleston. And also just highlighting the need to bring in additional partners. We talked to a number of local groups that are doing great work, but we also heard from a number of interviewees the need to bring in additional partners to make sure equity and affordability issues are further addressed. So with that being said, I will pass this over to Rosie to talk specifically about some of the housing tools that can be used to address issues of equity and inclusion.
So Catherine has laid out nicely the foundation for the city and county to effectively manage redevelopment in an equitable manner. One of the negative impacts of redevelopment can be rising housing costs, and as she already said, housing here is limited in supply and already unaffordable. So for homeowners, financial and legal literacy will be very invaluable. We heard during our interview process that the existing tax rate cap on properties is not well known nor well understood by homeowners. Additionally, a unique challenge here are heir property rights, and legal literacy can help those that live on those properties better understand the rights and tools available to them. The city and county should be creating new programs, including a foreclosure prevention program. Other programs like that across the country can involve anything from counseling, mediation with lenders, a renegotiation of mortgage terms, or even a savings program. Finally, financial incentives will be important for upkeep and improvements, especially considering your senior population, who will need to retrofit their properties for accessibility challenges. These can involve tax abatements as well as financial incentives, some of which don't even need to come from public funds. Private sector actors like Fannie Mae have great programs that help with capital improvements that are costly up front, but reduce monthly costs and utility bills, like their Green Housing Fund. And your renters. These are very, very vulnerable. You have the highest eviction rate in the country. Eviction goes far beyond the families that are removed from their home. And this has impacts on the greater community through vacancy, blight, and increased homelessness, as well as the city budget, which sees increased costs in housing, hospitalization, policing, and prison stays that all come from increased eviction. So first and foremost, the city and county have a responsibility to renters to better educate those renters on the HUD Fair Housing Hotline. This can offer a number of resources for renters that are at risk of eviction. New programs that are needed include an eviction prevention program. We've seen programs across the country that have had success in providing legal assistance to renters who are in court against their landlord. Additionally, emergency funds can be very invaluable to help renters cover the costs when unexpected costs arise in their household and prevent them from making rent payments on time. And then for those renters who are maybe in the position to move into home ownership, some programs in this country offer down payment assistance that can be done at the city, county, or state level. Or there are other protections that can be put in place for renters to turn into homeowners. And finally, you need to expand your housing supply. With any redevelopment plans, the population is going to continue to increase, and you need the housing stock to meet that demand. The city and county can do this by just offering a wide spectrum of housing options that include mixed income and mixed tenure developments. To do this, it just requires reviewing the existing zoning, how approval processes are done, building codes that might need modernization, as well as other maybe new construction technologies or housing typologies that are out there that increase density without the appearance of doing so. And now I'll turn it back to Catherine to talk about other community services.
So in addition to all of the housing tools that are available, there are also a number of other tools that, quite frankly, either exist or that can be used to help jumpstart some of the efforts in a way that addresses some of the social concerns. First thing we heard loud and clear is DSS, which is located near the study area, likes being in the community with residents that they serve. And so one of our biggest recommendations, particularly given the work that they do around Child and Family Services, providing TANF and SNAP benefits, is that they either stay in place or they stay in the area, but having that proximity to their clientele is hugely important, and potentially attract other users that can complement the suite of services that they provide. Next is food. And as you'll hear the panel talk about, we recognize that a grocer was not ready to move to the area in large part because there just aren't enough households in their view to be able to service a new grocery store. But that being said, there are efforts that the city and county can take as interim uses, interim measures to address the food desert issues. This is actually an image of a project that I worked on in Washington, D.C., a bit extravagant, but we created a food pavilion in the middle of a food desert. There was one grocery store to service 70,000 residents in the area, and we were able to create with government funds a food, open-air food market and attract fresh foods. This was actually a Whole Foods market that they did on a pop-up basis, but other food outlets. And we were as thoughtful as possible. We made sure that SNAP benefits were accepted at the market, but we also provided wraparound services at the market. And we had other nonprofits that either did health testing, provided free clothing, and the like. But this is actually a huge opportunity at the Bus Rapid Transit Center. Because you're going to have so many people coming in and out of that center. Once it's constructed, it's easy enough to create an overhang relatively inexpensively, identify a local operator who can attract both fresh food vendors as well as any other wraparound services, and make it really easy for people to access those foods and services while the grocery store is in development. And we do recognize that the city and county are doing everything they can to attract a grocery store. Finally, we would be remiss if we didn't talk about workforce and small business. We talked to some great small businesses, and while the city and county and the region have done an awesome job of attracting national employers, it is just as important to support those small businesses. And in a redevelopment like this, giving whether it's preferences or what have you to make sure that those small businesses, whether they're local businesses, minority-owned businesses, are provided opportunities as part of the redevelopment is hugely important, because it's those small businesses and the local businesses that are going to be here through thick and thin. This is their hometown, and so we want to do what we can to support them. And then finally, job training. Because of the education system, a lot of the residents are coming out without those soft skills that they need to be able to be employable. So creating job training programs that not only create those soft skill training tools, but also address these known barriers like criminal records, education levels, and drug use is going to be critical to making sure that the local population is able to also benefit from the redevelopment. So with that being said, we will pass it over to talk about transportation. Thank you.
So I know this is the real reason why you're all here, because we all love to talk about transportation. So thank you for the opportunity to be here and talk to you through some of our ideas. So starting at kind of a bigger picture level, we believe you should build on the city and regional efforts related to transportation. With Bus Rapid Transit, it really has an opportunity to be transformative. And that's where these parcels that we keep talking about, the planning areas, become very important, because otherwise North Charleston will be a pass-through. And what you want to be is a place where people come and want to be and hang out and shop and live. And so making sure that you all are working with the city is working with the Council of Governments to ensure that there is the appropriate density on those sites. This is an opportunity for access to jobs. You know, there's a lot of job centers along the corridor, access to education, particularly Trident Tech. Access to health facilities, as we've discussed, some of the civic centers that we're proposing in the area, and just access to different resources. One of the things I will say is, as the project continues to move forward, we understand it's in the planning and design phase, but as it moves forward, the city really working with the Council of Governments to make sure the existing neighborhoods have safe access to the bus rapid transit stations. Making sure that they can walk, they can bike, and get to those stations safely, and even with the new developments. We also know that you all are looking at Sproul and Reynolds and trying to reimagine what they could be. And as those move forward, again, just making sure you're also thinking about incorporating green infrastructure. I understand you have a little water problem. I work in the District of Columbia. We have water problems too. So looking at things like street trees, rain gardens, bioswales, anything that can just hold that water and prevent mosquitoes but hold that water, and it also help clean the water before it goes back into your rivers and your water table. And really making sure you're considering people who are biking, walking, and using wheelchairs, and making sure that we're still connecting to existing neighborhoods. We've heard that you're looking at pedestrian only for Reynolds. We do encourage you to consider pedestrian priority, so still allowing bicycles and other vehicles to move through at a very low speed, just to make sure that we're continuing to serve those communities, because you don't quite have the density to generate the pedestrian traffic for pedestrian only. But moving on, one of the questions that you asked us was, are public investments needed to the area's built environment, such as streetscapes, bike lanes, etc.? Yes, exclamation point. The study area has the most crashes in the county. On the left-hand side, you see a crash heat map. On the right-hand side, we've zoomed in, and that red area is our study area. You have a lot of crashes, largely because you have wide streets. You have wide lanes. You have way more capacity on your roadways than you need. And I know every time I travel, people always look at me like, why are you always trying to reduce roadway capacity? Because most of our roads are just too wide, and that makes them unsafe. Just for some context, on the left is McMillan. So today, McMillan has 4 travel lanes, roughly 6,300 vehicles per day moving on that street. There's really no sidewalk, there's no street trees, there's no bike infrastructure. I know I come from the District of Columbia, and North Charleston is not the District of Columbia, but just for some context comparison, this is a street in Washington, D.C. It has 2 travel lanes, parallel parking on one side, diagonal parking on the other side. It is moving 4,000 more vehicles per day than what you have on McMillan. So just for some context, you can reduce the capacity on McMillan. There's also 4 bus routes, 2 which are local, 2 are routes that connect the entire city, and 2 are what we call premium transit routes. So even with all of that, you can reduce the capacity on some of your streets, and that's something that can happen independent of any new development that will occur on these parcels. So as a re-envision McMillan Avenue, and this is just a concept, you can obviously play with this in many different ways, but you could reduce it to 2 travel lanes. It opens up the opportunity to do a really great median with a stormwater system to help with managing some of the water. I know that you have really high water tables, and so really we need to think environmentally of how can we use our roadway system to help with storing and cleaning the water, adding some street trees. You could do parking on both sides, as Paul talked about, opportunities to have some retail along McMillan so that parking could support that retail, putting in protected bike lanes on both sides. You have the space to do all of these things. Looking at Cosgrove, that's another one that's way over capacity. It's about 7,300 vehicles per day. You could take that down to 2 travel lanes. Again, adding a median. I'm trying to get you green infrastructure wherever we can. So getting some stormwater systems in, widening the sidewalks. They are continuous today, but they're not quite compliant with the Americans with Disability Act. So making sure people with wheelchairs who are using any other mobility device can actually move through from the neighborhoods. And again, these are things that can happen independent of any new development. And we understand that Cosgrove is proposed for freight. While I'm not a huge fan of freight going through neighborhoods, even with reducing the capacity, you could still probably handle some freight on these roadways. So now talking about the new connections, as Emil mentioned, really parcel 4, the planning area 4, which is the old naval site, that is your best opportunity to really create a seamless connection between the existing neighborhoods and some of the new development. The challenges with the other sites is that you have housing backed up right against those parcels, and we do not recommend removing housing for the sake of access, so that's crystal clear. But that really is your best opportunity. So talking through, so one of those is Dorchester. Dorchester right now ends at Rivers. You could actually bring that through the site. That's something you could do now, design maybe not the whole thing, but at least part of it, so that cars can travel continue to travel through. And so what that does, it creates a connection with your new aquatic center. that you're building. So it creates that connection for the neighborhoods and buses and the transit center, which we'll talk about in a little bit. But also you have a really dense tree buffer right now that protects the neighborhoods in the Cherokee neighborhood. And we actually recommend keeping that. I understand anytime you try to recreate a grid and open up some roadways, it can create some anxiety around neighbors, but this gives them some sense of privacy while also providing them access to anything that happens on that new development site. So these are the new connections in the Cherokee neighborhood. North of Cosgrove, you have really narrow roads now, and so we actually say let's keep them narrow, maybe narrow them even a little bit more. So you still have 2-lane roadways, but it makes people slow down to have to navigate around each other. Although right now the way the drainage is, I don't know if you can necessarily get a concrete sidewalk, but at least considering a walking path, so for people who are walking, who use wheelchairs, mobility devices, have a place to be that's not the middle of the roadway, particularly if we're going to continue this grid into the site. There may be some increased traffic, but what we're trying to do is just make it feel private, make it feel like, ooh, I'm not supposed to make this turn down this roadway. South of Cosgrove, you do have some sidewalks on the west side. So looking at improving those sidewalks, repaving the roadway, and then copying that typical section through some of those new roads. And the thing about it is that you can make those improvements today. There's an opportunity today to improve that pavement, to improve the ability for those neighborhoods to walk and bike and use mobility devices. And so now on to the transit center. So our understanding is there was a discussion of an 8-bay bus transfer station. It was envisioned on McMillan, but there's really an opportunity to move it somewhere else. Your better location is actually on the southern portion of planning area 4, which is the old Naval Hospital site, closer to rivers. 1, just in terms of bringing all the buses together. 2, in terms of access to both the new development and some of the existing services. And there's really an opportunity to co-locate that bus transfer station, what we're calling the transit center, with other uses. It can be parking, it can be public space and development. So I'm going to quickly just show you some ideas. I'm going to start from basic and I'm going to go to really extravagant. I'm not suggesting all of those, but it's just to tickle the mind so that you can know what's possible. So starting with some of the more basic, in Collier County, Florida, they have 6 bus bays, an air-conditioned customer service center, and then 6 stories of parking. Again, this is something that you could move forward with today. We've heard from different employers in the area. There's a need for parking. There's an opportunity to allow them to park there and then either use bus service or whatever to get them to the different job centers. Boulder, Colorado, they have an underground bus transfer station with parking and affordable housing on top. Again, that's something that can move forward today, probably causes a little bit more coordination between the different agencies, but it's something that could move forward. Now we're going to get a little bit more ostentatious. So this is the Transit Bay Center in San Francisco, California. This is clearly bigger than what you all need, but what they do is they have local buses, regional buses, inner-city buses like Greyhound, which we understand that you're not necessarily trying to accommodate. But really what's interesting about this is that they put a 4.5-acre park on the roof. And so they've created public space where there was no public space. Again, just some ideas, because now we're going to go really big to Amsterdam. So in Amsterdam, it really is an iconic hybrid building. It has apartments, it has a food market, it has a hardware store. So these are things just to think about. Understanding the bigger you go, the more coordination. But we see that, right, this can move forward today. If you go ahead and subdivide the parcel, this is something that can move forward today and just working together between the city, the county, the council of governments, because the need is there today. And with that, we are going to move into implementation.
Thank you. I'm going to get from the grandiose to the granular a bit. What I'm going to talk about effectively is about a proposed density bonus to be given to the Chicora, Cherokee, and Union Heights area to encourage redevelopment of the area and reverse the deterioration that's been evident there for some time. This will address 4 major themes that have been running through the discussions around the area. One, it'll add additional demand for the grocery store that everybody wants. Number 2, it'll provide housing at a price which would be affordable to the workers in the area, particularly at the Naval Yard. Number 3, it would address the 2,000 vacant lots and 2,000 substandard homes that are in that area, and that will continue to deteriorate unless investment and incentives for investment are brought into the neighborhood. And that process would lead to ultimate further deterioration and ultimately gentrification over what I would predict at least a long 20-year period unless something affirmatively is done, and it can be done relatively easily and relatively quickly. And my discussions with some local developers indicates that there is a demand that could come in and fill this gap. Lastly, by doing the density bonus and collecting fees for that density bonus, it could create an affordable housing fund that would help mitigate the impact of this process on existing residents in the neighborhood, could create an inventory of affordable both for sale and rental housing, and by restricting the use of the proceeds of sale, ultimately of those houses, would create an ongoing fund which would perpetuate the diversity and economic viability and diversity of the neighborhood. Without action, as I say, this area will continue to slowly gentrify and continue to decay. I think that's evident from projects that seem similar to this and been participatory in all over the country. Okay, so what's the simple way to do this? Some time ago, the city downzoned the properties in this area from R2 to R1. That is effectively a tax. By reversing that tax and letting developers pay for it, you can create the funds to create the affordable housing project, affordable housing funds that should go into a public-private land trust to create the opportunities for the displaced tenants and bring in housing at a price that would be affordable. I know I've run through some numbers. I've discussed this with some developers in the area. I don't want to get into the numbers now, but I'm available to do that for anyone who wants to hear about it. In order to show that this works, and this effectively would be what we call in LA small lot subdivisions that have been very successful in the Los Angeles market, and I think is viable here given the comparative costs and market values of property. I think the numbers work. I proposed that there be a pilot project to demonstrate that this small lot subdivision would work here, either on one of the parcels in parcel 5 or possibly the land that was the overpass to the Navy Yard, which is now city-owned land to the south. The coordination of these kinds of developments with the existing economy, I think, will reduce car traffic tremendously. I live in Venice, California, where there are literally hundreds of motorized vehicles other than cars called scooters, electric bikes, that basically dominate the neighborhood in terms of transportation without having cars. Given the job demand that there is in the Naval Yard and that will come out of this center, there is no reason for people to have to drive. I know that may sound really strange in a car culture, particularly coming from Los Angeles, which is the car culture, but it actually does work. And given that, plus the merger with the public transportation that's coming down here, is a natural for this neighborhood. The continued coordination of this, I think, requires the creation of a community development department to balance all of these simultaneous variables at once. This is very sophisticated stuff, but the market will take care of it if you let the market do it. Thank you.
Hi there. So in addition to addressing single-family homes in the city, there's a really critical need to codify some development guidelines sort of along the rivers corridor, the sort of the bigger picture, to ensure that future growth fully leverages the BRT that's planned, and to set a regional example for how we can develop more dense and more equitable development, benefiting residents and businesses. This should entail a zoning overlay like others that are planned or in existence in the city. And it should include guidelines that set minimum development standards along key corridors to encourage the sort of more dense transit-oriented development. The zoning overlay should, in particular, provide relief from some standard city requirements, including parking, for projects that meet various objectives such as mixed-income housing, public open space, retail amenities, civic uses, and environmental sustainability. The zoning overlay should also restrict uses that are not conducive to transit and to walking. That may include a gas station, but it probably also includes other uses that are inconsistent with the vision, whether it's self-storage, heavy industrial, or large floor plate distribution uses that are not transit-oriented. Moving from the bigger picture to the county site, the county should set an example of how to use public land for public benefit. That can support the sort of greater implementation of the vision that's described by some of my colleagues, and it's going to require a patient and a thoughtful approach to maximize financial and social value. Building on engagement in the community, there needs to be a master plan that's developed for this site, and it should balance community uses with market-driven uses, and incorporate at a minimum some of the public aspects of the projects that were described by my colleagues before, as well as affordable housing. By developing a master plan that the community sticks to, that will allow for sort of a clear expectation to developers that can create an apples-to-apples comparison of development projects that will really maximize financial value as well as community value. And to further enhance development, the county really should collaborate with the city on various funding and financing tools, especially for the public components of the project, that will enhance the quality of the project, as well as the environmental and the social benefit of the project, and the incremental value. All of what I've described before is essentially a public-private partnership, and that should be a model for the use of public land outside of the county's own site, but within North Charleston and sort of more broadly in Charleston County. That will support equitable development, and if properly applied, can mitigate disruption and displacement in existing neighborhoods. And that's really important because regionally, the city and the county have seen really incredible and unprecedented economic growth, which is due in no small part to the leadership of several of the people in this room in terms of various types of industry attraction initiatives, land use and policy initiatives, as well as direct investment in infrastructure. But the community has demanded more. There's public value that can be reinvested in the community through the disposal or the sale or lease of public assets that really needs to be considered when approving projects on private land and when selling public land. That may include discounting the value of that land to support various types of community benefits, in particular affordable housing. None of what I've described before is possible unless there's clarity, consistency, and transparency from the public sector. Developers want to know the rules, and in particular, national and regional developers who have the sophistication to deliver mixed income projects that are transit-oriented, that are higher density. They want to know what the public expects of them, and getting the best deal for residents of North Charleston and Charleston County means creating competition for the right to develop projects that everyone supports, and that's shown in the process here on the right. And finally, because it's very clear that real estate values and land values are going to continue to grow, when evaluating public-private partnerships, we would recommend that municipalities act as stewards of the land and ground lease their projects wherever possible, which will increase control from the public sector side, but also allow for municipalities and residents to capture value that's created through the initiatives that I described before, and to generate funds that can be used in perpetuity to support the community and the communities that need it most. And finally, looking at the bigger picture, to encourage investment in the study area and to foster equitable and sustainable growth, the collaboration that's been demonstrated through this panel by the partners who are shown on the screen, as well as a range of other nonprofit organizations and community members, should be formalized to create essentially what is an interorganizational steering committee that can be used to address stakeholder needs through brave leadership in implementing the equitable development programs that were described before, and also to better understand what partners are doing, coming together to discuss them, to identify potential improvements, and to either contribute or advocate for resources at the state or the federal level to enhance projects to maximize community impact. Finally, we've been very impressed by the individual capacity of the many city, county, and nonprofit staff members that we've met with today, particularly the ones that Andrew thanked before. But the work really starts here. More talented staff are necessary, as Catherine described, in particular at the city, to support enhanced engagement with the private sector, which is to say developers and other parties, and to accelerate the creation of affordable housing and environmental sustainability, and to further the wide range of initiatives that are otherwise needed to prevent displacement and to preserve the dynamic history, the culture, and the people of North Charleston.
Okay, after what you've heard today, what are the next steps? How does the city and county demonstrate the commitment to the greater community by initiating steps that can be accomplished immediately to support high-quality investment and development, demonstrate a commitment to address issues associated with potential displacement, and continue a track record of attracting economic anchors to the region? So what are those next steps? What can we do now to show our commitment? Begin now the outreach process. You can begin this immediately. How to educate and engage all the stakeholders. And we've got tools for that that will be available. Collaborate and grow capacity. Form this housing and community development department within the city so you can facilitate a lot of what we've been talking about. Form a joint city and county committee to ensure a successful redevelopment of the area and cooperation. And most importantly, create a district-wide overlay plan. This is the opportunity for the city to establish its future vision and is very important. Adherence to this plan is the key to the success of the plan. And that's got to be over the next few years. How do you adhere to this plan? Because a well-conceived plan will maximize the positive impact of the BRT. So starting with pre-development steps and developing a site-specific concept plan would be the next step prior to commencing construction for the Community Resources Hub and Transit Center. And this is how we can move forward and demonstrate commitment to the community that changes are coming, and positive ones at that. Thereafter, commencing construction of the Community Resources Hub and Transit Center will establish the framework for the future of that corridor. And then lastly, what was spoken about by Lance, try a pilot program for affordable housing, utilizing this density bonus scheme, and see if it works. That's the best way to know if this is something that will work in your community. Thank you.
Thank you. And we're going to wrap up. I'm very mindful of time. We've gone a little long here, and I don't want to cut into the question and answer phase of today. We were asked a number of questions, and what you've heard, what we've shared with you, is a very high-level summary. Not only did we sort of spend time, we started on our presentation at late morning yesterday on this presentation, but prior to that, between the 90 interviews on Tuesday and yesterday late morning, we wrote a very comprehensive report. And so there will be a lot of detail coming to you, and we've just tried to give you as much of a snapshot as we can. But it's complicated. There's a lot of things going on. So rather than sort of explicitly sort of go through the questions that, you know, you've posed us and our responses, I think you can probably gain enough information from what was shared. But I do want to leave you with a leave behind before we move into questions and answers. And so what do we learn and what do we hear? One of your city's major strengths are your neighbourhoods, right? The collective history of families who have lived in the area and personally invested for generations. Neighbourhoods are not made up just of bricks and mortar and streets and sewers, but by people. And the people we've met are super invested and should be and are a part of the solution so that they can carry forward a collective vision that everyone is engaged in through the process. I think it's easy for us to point to elected officials, to cities, to counties, to NGOs as providing the answer. But I think more importantly, it is what is the role of the individual? How can individuals be empowered to be able to step up and to collectively lean into this greater vision. And I think the clarity of communication is fundamental to include that. And I'll leave you with a final thought that, one of the things that I've always learned and been impressed by as a part of a panel process like this is it brings people together to start a conversation, right? And I think where we see the importance of this moving forward is for you now to continue that conversation. Don't wait until you get the report in 3 months' time. Talk to each other and commit together collectively to carry this forward. We do appreciate the fact that leading into this, there was a steering committee that was formed to help guide this process. Use that and reach out to your broader community to make it happen. And finally, often in a lot of these situations, people look to us to identify a silver bullet. They don't exist. There are no silver bullets. The BRT opens the door to an opportunity. But at the end of the day, it's the small incremental change that you can own and move forward with that is the really important sort of steps and moves. So don't wait. Come into work on Monday morning and start. Take the next step and make it happen. And don't wait for that report, because by the time you get our report in 3 months' time, it'll be redundant because you will have hopefully moved forward and done the things that we hope you move forward to do. So with that, thank you very much. We are going to be around for a period of time. I do apologise for Paul. He had to travel to the other side of the country to catch up with his family again, and unfortunately the travel schedule didn't suit, so he sends his apologies and his thanks.
We're going to open it up for questions. I guess what I probably will do is turn around this podium, and you can ask the panel. The panel has have microphones. Oh, Ryan Johnson has a microphone back there. So I guess if you have questions, Ryan Johnson is in the back. Raise your hand. He'll deliver a microphone to you, and we'll go that way. Thank you guys so much for that. That was a wonderful presentation. Any questions for the panel? Yes, sir. We're gonna mic you up real quick.
I lived in Knoxville, Tennessee, and TVA did something called ground leasing. It's a very smart way to do that. People lived in the house as long as they wanted to, but as the appreciations went up, they could not sell the house. So it was always kept as a house that was affordable for people. And that's something that we could do fairly easily. So I think that's something we should think about. I think that this intermobile will be an interesting situation. I like the idea that maybe we could have some type of produce market there. That makes a lot of sense to me. The land is there. It's a place where people will be able to get to very, very reasonably. And also, and maybe it's a little bit out of step, but I see an awful lot of dollar stores here in North Charleston. They're making some money, so maybe they could be the mayor. People in charge could say, well, maybe we could put some produce in some of those dollar stores. I think that's something that they could probably do very easily. Also, a lot of these stores, when I used to live in New York City, they had one place where they had a meat market, and then they actually did all the meats processing in one place, and then they divided it out to different stores that way. So that's just a couple of things that we could think about, and I'd be glad to be involved with any type of community development that I would be asked to do.
Thank you for those comments. Are there any other questions for the panel?
Good morning. I would just like to first applaud all of the communities that had gotten together to make this possible. The last time I saw this happen in the city of North Charleston was when we got word that our naval base was going to be closed. And I saw such a connectivity with all of the governmental entities that knew that they were going to see a loss, and so much was gained from that. I just want to say that based on the report this morning, there are several things I think that we're already doing. One is that within the city of North Charleston, there is currently a land trust. We are babies at this point, but that is the here. Secondly, we have been talking about within one of our organization, LAMPC, about creating an eviction program because we recognize, especially in the African American communities, people are forced out of their homes because they're paying more than 30% of their rents, and that the housing that they are renting are in very poor substandard conditions.
Thank you for those comments. Are there other questions for the panel?
And Adam, if I can just add on the community land trust, we heard that loud and clear, and we were so encouraged to hear about the community land trust. I just want to put a finer point on it, that it's important in order to make sure that the community land trust is successful, that it has land. And so one of our key recommendations is to make sure that as the city and the county are looking at small residential plots of land that can be redeveloped, particularly in partnership with a community land trust or larger sites that can be developed in partnership with the housing authority, that those plots are in fact transferred over to either the community land trust or the housing authority or some other group that's going to use it for affordable housing redevelopment.
I don't know whether the City Council knows about the Sustainability Institute. It's on Sproul Avenue. And what they do is they've had former inmates, people who have bad backgrounds, and they're teaching them how to do energy audits. Energy audits are very important. So you can have an older house and there's no insulation in there. So they're paying tremendous amounts for heating and cooling. So this is a local institution. It's run by one of the reverends here in the church. I'll give you the information if they'd like to know about that. So they do the energy audits, and then they also put in insulation and things that will make the house more efficient.
Thank you.
Thanks, y'all. Question I would pose to the panel is, in your experience doing these, what usually makes them successful, or are there some of these studies you've done that are particularly unsuccessful for a certain reason? I'm wondering, in your experience, what makes it work and what doesn't after you leave?
You do. Seriously. We can provide as many recommendations and sophisticated answers to you, but you own this community, you're invested in this community. You now have the conversation started. Please keep it going. We can't mandate or enforce anything. We can offer our impartial, best practice experience, but you now have to move forward and own it and want to make the change, want to be the change. So I think with the steering committee, you've got certainly a start. I'd invite everyone to get involved in that, and I don't know if I'm authorized to do that, Adam, but, but be the change. I think that's really the important message here.
Quick. I think we heard about a lot of different aspects, and thank you for that. But I'm just curious, out of everything, maybe the panel has a general answer. What was the biggest challenge or opportunity that you saw, and what would be the consequences if you saw that we didn't focus heavily on that?
You have the county Naval Hospital site has caused a lot of pain and a lot of sentiment about it, a lot of emotion about it. It's very understandable. There's an understandable sentiment. Let's just get rid of this thing. Let's find somebody who's going to offer some reasonable amount of money, whatever that is, and move. Let's move forward. That would be, on a long-term basis, that would be a big loss. I mean, you have this asset in an incredible location that has nothing but upside, one of the fastest-growing regions in the country, not just in the Southeast. And our sentiment would be more, don't ever sell it. Ground lease it. Always control that. it's a strategically important area that has upside potential, and if it's controlled and done properly, and if you can do the kind of education you might need to, and I don't know how much, I'm making assumptions that there are attitudes that don't like density down here. Maybe that's wrong. Maybe you love density, but most places I've worked, it's the D word, as I said in my presentation. So, but we've tried to show how good design can overcome what people are thinking when they think of that word. In fact, I would recommend not ever using that word. Show people what you mean. When you show people, I was in a focus group where we showed people developments at different densities that were well designed, and they consistently underestimated how much density was there. You know, if you do it right, if you integrate parking properly, if you integrate open space, if you have good design, you can present things that people will enjoy and give you the opportunity, as I said, to achieve both a financial success and a kind of inclusive development.
And if I could just offer a brief follow-up to that. It's important to understand that sometimes the best deals you do are the deals you don't do. Don't sell a farm. You're sitting on this valuable asset that can offer the opportunity to be a heart to these 12 neighborhoods. And really, often, you know, cities, counties, and others don't think about value. You have enormous value here, and use that to be in a way that can be, you know, transferred into those neighborhoods. So don't do the first deal that comes to town. Understand what it is that you're sitting on and take advantage of it.
First off, I'd like to thank everybody for bringing their expertise and their vision. My question is, as we move forward with your suggestions, are any of you available for consultation or for feedback?
Hi everyone, thank you so much for coming. So if there's any of the panelists you want to talk to after the panel, please just contact the Urban Land Institute through Adam, and we will figure out, you know, our panelists have committed a week of their time and are all now very passionate and excited about this community and this area, and we just want to help moderate that conversation. And the Urban Land Institute will also be here as a resource.
Good morning. And like everyone else, I'd like to thank you also. I think we've definitely bridged passion to purpose. And my question to you all is, well, I've always been told never ask a question unless you have an idea of what the answer should be. So based on the fact that we do have a lot of resources, they're readily available in the city of North Charleston. However, they are very poorly connected. Based on all you do and the places where you do it, thinking in terms of older people and people, period, who do not use social media, how would you suggest we connect these private resources, public resources, to make them better, more accessible to not just some communities, but to all communities?
That's why we're recommending that we actually have dedicated staff for housing and community development, because if it were easy, it'd already be done. And so reaching out, knowing where residents live. You also heard Althea talk about bringing out flyers, putting them in kids' backpacks so that the parents get information about what's going on in their community. But there does have to be dedicated staff to make sure everybody is being reached, because even if it is posted on social media, people are so busy they don't get the information. And so making sure, whether it's showing up at churches, whether it's showing up at school nights, however the community gets the information, there has to be somebody whose job it is. And then also pulling in all the different nonprofits and community partners and leaders to make sure that they're part of the conversation as well, because it's going to take everybody to make sure that all of the various different groups are reached, but there's got to be some centralized coordinating function in order to make sure that those efforts are successful.
Judge Roll.
You do realize, and I hope you took into consideration, that we've tried to sell this property for quite a while and have gotten damn near 0 offers for it. Does that play into your discussion about where to find the funds for private-public partnerships and development, no matter whether it's completely social, non-social, economic development, community activity only, or whatever?
We do recognize that, and that's why it's really important that the first move not be to try to sell the property to someone who comes up. There needs to be a process of what we call creating value on the site. Part of that is the BRT. Part of that is parking infrastructure that can be used by local employers who are short of parking right now, as well as the open space and the community facilities that are described. All of those are going to change the perception of the site, and in particular, some of the tools that we described, including tax increment financing, if they're packaged into a clear, concise master plan that includes funding sources to increase the financial feasibility of the project, over time that's going to increase value and it's going to increase developer interest in the project, but it's not something that's going to happen tomorrow. As you know, if you go out to bid with the project right now, you're not going to find anyone interested in it, and that's going to take a process to create value that benefits the community and interests the development community.
One of the things that was really impressive was the amount of interest from a whole range of people about seeing this project move forward. We heard conversations with the Naval Yard about their desire to see parking and their willingness to entertain supplementing getting that built so that they could bring employees to the area. I think there's a lot of room in here for coordination between levels of government and the employment community, the private industries that have come into the area and have a very large vested interest in seeing this develop in a productive way. So I think a wider conversation may generate a lot more support than you're seeing at this moment. Creating ease of visioning what this project can be will bring developers. There's no question. I've never seen an area that is so much the hole in the donut as this project. There is so much wealth and growth around it, and it sits in the middle of it and isn't moving. So the fact that this will at some point break the dam is not an if, it's a when. The question is how you control the when and how you control the outcome.
We've heard from y'all what y'all recommend, but I haven't heard what actually the community wants. I know y'all interviewed folks in the community, so what actually did the community want? We are hearing a recommendation from what the ULI is recommending, but what actually does the community want? Because I think their input is very important as well, but I'm not hearing that. I'm hearing, here's what we should do with the property, here's what we should do to enhance the area. But did y'all factor in what the community want?
Yes, we did, sir. We believe it's incredibly important. One of the things we tried not to do in the course of this week is to develop another plan, because we can't do that. We don't know enough information. We're not as deeply invested as needed to be able to do that with certainty. But what we did say is that a visioning process would be what we see as one of the first steps that need to occur here. Now, people would scratch their head and say, well, we've already got a plan, but we're not sure what that plan is fully inclusive or, represents the interests and needs of the broader public. And so one of the first steps is to do an inclusive visioning session, a visioning process. So to make sure that everyone's interests and needs are accommodated within whatever offering is taken to the market. Now, what that also means is that you get a lot more people investing and realizing, well, I've got a role to play in this, right? Whether it's churches or non-governments or the individual who owns a house down the street. Getting them to the table and getting them involved in the visioning process is fundamental to what we would recommend is then setting the stage for the project to move forward to its next levels.
Can I follow up?
Yeah, please.
I don't want to be presumptuous about this, but I've never worked in a community where there wasn't any conflict and differences of opinion. And when we're talking about visioning and moving forward together, the assumption is there's going to be some arguments and there are going to be some fights about it. And that's good, because maybe those things are not being articulated now. Maybe there's just suspicions because people don't really talk to one another. And so get on with it.
So the main focus, I'm assuming, was the whole area, and the old Naval Hospital is a big eyesore for the community. You guys stated parceling the land off into 4 sections, land leasing, things of that nature. My question is really for, not necessarily for you all, but for the county, because I'm assuming you guys are just giving your suggestions. What is the county planning on doing with the land? Are you guys going to go with the suggestions? What's going to happen with it, in essence? Because these are all suggestions from you all, but if we don't have a firm idea from what the county really wants to do with the land, then we can't take any step forwards to bring investors or things of that nature.
I think that certainly this is the first time the county's heard the recommendations from this panel as well. So, there's going to take some time to digest that. I mean, this presentation will be available to the public and obviously to the sponsors today. I have a copy in my pocket right here. So I'll make sure that everyone has that. It's going to take us a little bit of time to figure out what the county and the city and how we want to partner together. I think the suggestion of putting it together and keeping the steering committee together to maintain that engagement and that collaboration, which is one of the first times we've really done this on a large-scale project like this. I think it's really important. I think that's a very, very good recommendation from this body. And, I think we're going to just take some time. We'll get together, and then the county ultimately will make the decision. It is their land, but we hope that they will collaborate and listen to what our citizens and what the city needs as well. So it's a longer conversation. We'll take one more question.
First, like everybody has echoed, we appreciate your time. I understand there was no pay for it, so it's greatly appreciated. I do have 3 comments. One, the definition of affordable housing, whether it be affordable, attainable, workforce, I think you need to start with that, as a community. And secondly, I'd ask, did y'all take the school perspective into your study and what we can do to improve the schools in the area, which will coincide with everything that we do here? And lastly, what did we do with the ICTF that's going in and the port, and how does that factor into the area? Thank you.
Let's start with the definition.
Sure. So when we looked at the income levels, we're really talking about affordable to 60% or below the area median income. That will be defined formally in the report. We can't cover everything, but we found that that is more representative of the folks that actually live here and are facing housing challenges.
In respect to the other uses, and we didn't spell it out specifically here in our presentation, but in our report, we believe that the rail marshalling a yard has the potential to create a huge barrier to this community and should be sort of discouraged at every level. The idea of a 2-mile long train. We sat coming back from Montague Avenue last night from dinner, and we had the benefit of, I think, Thomas counting the fact that, how many carriages per minute for the 7 minutes that we were sort of sitting there. If you multiplied that by, I'm not very good at math, but it's going to be another barrier to the community. And I think, we don't often think about the opportunity cost in the things that, the changes that come to our community, whether they're road overpasses or road widenings or rail or even, a large industrial complex. They all start to dilute the value of our community. And I think you need to resist, I don't know if I can say publicly that you should revolt, but I think you should revolt. You need to...
We will be in a federal lawsuit within the next year with the South Carolina Public Rails and the Class A carriers, because when we negotiated, we were forced to take the Port Authority. It was supposed to go to a place called Daniel Island, If you ever get off over there, they've got cement roads that were supposed to be handling truck traffic. Didn't happen. It got thrown on us. But we have been promised 3 overpasses so that the rail will not slow us down and block us. Nobody has come to battle for us on that. I mean, they're about to complete a port access road, and we have a document that says the port cannot open until the overpasses are built. But nobody's designing our overpasses. So we know that we're going to end up in litigation, and there's no sense in going to a state court against a state agency. The only way we're going to be able to do it is in federal court. But we're prepared as a city to do that and fight that. We believe in industry. We know industry is good for the community, but there has to be ways that we can work together so it coincides and doesn't destroy the communities around it. And so it's a battle that we've got going on. You're absolutely correct. People don't mind trains crossing roads when they stop. You know, it is a pain in the pituitary. You know, if you go back and look at our history, we just gave one company on the Navy base $8,000 in tickets for violating the agreement we have on truck traffic and where it can be and things of that nature. If the system works the way it's supposed to, every truck that leaves that naval facility that's involved in port-related activities should be going to Interstate 26 through the new port access road. Our concern is they're not going to do that. And so we're trying to find ways to battle that, like on Sproul Avenue. It's now a 2-lane road instead of a 4-lane road to discourage truck traffic. We're going to be creating parking on the sides of that road and looking for ways that we can control it as much as possible. But on a tier of power, North Charleston's here, the state is here, the federal government is there. So we're going to need a lot of support from a lot of groups to make sure that the people of the city of North Charleston are protected. And so the rail is a major. I mean, I've had more videos condemning the railroad than Carter's has got little liver pills. But it's a thing that we have to work for, and the community has to stay involved and engaged in it. Because, you know, one of the problems that we're facing now, because they're constantly changing plans, it was supposed to be a north exit for rail and a south exit for rail. Now both Class 1s want to do south, both, which means it's going to go through the south end into the peninsula, or not the peninsula, but the city of Charleston, cross over between Meeting and King, which both Class 1 rail lines have lines there, and they will be building trains, which is going to block the access point for Accoby community all the time. We're not going to be able to get people into that neighborhood, including police, fire, and EMS, in a timely manner. They're going to have to go around to Azalea to get into the community. And we got to stop that. You know, where's the overpass that gives those folks that protection that we have to give them? And we're going to need a lot of public support because we're the underdogs. I mean, we're the little guy with the candle that's burning trying to say, hey, let us light up the world. And we're not getting anything but blowback to blow the candle out. But thank you for bringing that up.
In the school question?
Yeah. I will say we didn't give you a direct route of how to stop that project, but we did give you our opinion. And it's not a giant crying face, but it would be. And we did identify that as an opportunity. If you look at the scale of that property compared to the scale of this study area and what impact that could have in the transformation of this portion of North Charleston, it would be a huge opportunity to identify that. As far as schools, I think right now we're at a place where we just need to stop the bleeding. One way to do that is to focus on reinforcing our vulnerable populations and start strengthening our neighborhoods. That is, and I know I have others here that feel very passionately about it. One of the ways that our schools suffer are not having stable populations and supported children. So one way to do that is to make sure that we're focusing on these policies and procedures that are supporting our community.
Yeah. And just to reiterate the point, if families are moving every 3 to 6 months, you're never going to have a successful school system. So you have to address the housing stability issues first and foremost in order to make sure the schools are able to be successful.
Thank you all. Appreciate it. And thank you.
Thank you all for attending. Thank you to the panelists. Thank you for all the mayor and all the elected officials and county and city staff and our nonprofit partners and to the community. And again, my name's Adam McConnell. I work here in the mayor's office. I'll be up here if you're from the community or from a nonprofit group and you're not engaged, you want to be engaged, come talk to me. I'll give you my card and we can continue this dialogue as we move forward. So again, thank you all so much for coming out and we really do appreciate it. Thank you.